Hi everyone. I'm Maru, and I'm a self-taught front-end developer from Venezuela, currently based in Santiago de Chile. And this is my first time giving a talk, so I really hope I don't sound too nervous. Before getting started, I want to give a little background story about my coding journey. I started learning how to code in 2020, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, not only the ones just getting started, but also every developer, that you reach a point where you start feeling very overwhelmed hearing about all the technologies and platforms that exist. And I actually want to give you a visual representation of how I felt. This was me when I first started learning about web development in 2020. I had no idea what I was doing. I definitely did not look as cute as the dog, but that was me. And fun fact, I was scared of the word framework. Even after studying the fundamentals for a while, I kept saying that I wasn't ready because in my mind it was something just too advanced. So it took me some time to realize that all these technologies and tools exist to make our lives easier. And I know that may sound obvious, but to me, it was like this big revelation. And I also realized that it really depends on what you're trying to build. So when you find the right tools for your project, it just feels awesome. That is why today I want to talk about my experience choosing Sanity and Next.js to build a blog. And this was my first time using Sanity along with Next.js to build the blog section of my website that you can find at marucodes.com. I'll be sharing all my thoughts and also some of the key steps I followed to accomplish the blogging experience I wanted. So, moving on to why I chose Sanity, I have to mention that the first version of my website was plain HTML and CSS, which was absolutely fine. It's a small website and I didn't need anything else. But at one point, I decided that I wanted to start blogging. And of course, I could use one of the current blogging platforms, but I really wanted to use my own design and be more in control of my content. So I decided to build it on my own and take it as a learning opportunity. As for the goals for the new version, first, I wanted a static site. So I still wanted that same experience for the first version of my website, which was a static and fast site. I also wanted to use React, but honestly, I didn't want to deal with React Router. And lastly, as I mentioned, I wanted to use my own design without feeling restricted. And for the content handling part, I really wanted to have a user interface where I could visualize and write all my content there. I wanted to have everything nicely organized in the same place. I wanted flexibility in case at some point in the future I decide to add a new section or expand to something bigger. And lastly, I wanted to be able to display different types of content like code snippets. In my quest for the right tools, of course, I saw the traditional content management systems, but they also mentioned a bunch of other things like servers, routing requests, some like a lot of site maintenance, some complicated stuff with hosting, and all that seemed like a lot, especially for a small blog that it is now small, but perhaps in the future it grows to something bigger. So I wanted something that was easy to get started, but that would give me the tools if at some point in the future I decide to escalate my project. Eventually, I heard the term headless CMS, and I was watching a video by James Q. Quick. He has an awesome YouTube channel, and he was talking about Sanity and all of its awesome benefits, and I was just mind blown. The first thing that caught my attention was that the content and its data are accessible via calls made to the API. And I was like, hey, I've worked with APIs before fetching data. I can do that. It's modern and flexible. It has a user interface, which is the studio, and it is so clean and easy to use. It's built on top of React, so you can easily modify the studio if you want to. You can build your schema with JavaScript objects, and this already sounded very familiar to me, which was really nice. And it has an awesome community and documentation. This last one was actually very important because this was one of my first times using modern tools to build a website. So I really wanted all the resources I could have. So In summary, why I chose Sanity and Next. Of course, I chose Sanity because of all the awesome reasons I mentioned on my previous slide. But in summary, I chose Sanity because it is highly customizable. It has a lot of examples and starters so you can kick off your project. It has an awesome documentation and it just felt familiar. It was JavaScript objects dealing with data types and it was familiar and that was really nice. And Next.js, because of its static site generation, I mentioned I wanted a static site, and because of its file-based routing. So all of these cover all my needs for the new version of my website. So that is why I chose Sanity and Next. And I made this meme because that is exactly how I felt choosing them. And honestly, what really surprised me was how fast I could have Next and Sanity working together. After creating my Next app and installing the Sanity CLI, it was just a few commands and I already had all the code I needed to get started. But to me, the real magic happened after running Sanity Start and seeing the studio live. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well. So to talk a little bit about my studio, when I initialize my project, I pick the blog template that already comes with the post, author, and category schemas. And what I did is that I used them as a guide to build the project schema because I also wanted to handle that part of my website with data coming from Sanity. And I thought that it was so nice that I was able to follow the same pattern of the other schemas and check the docs anytime I had a doubt. And I was able to build a schema on my own without any experience and in just a few minutes. So that was really cool. Then to accomplish the blogging experience I wanted, I also had to do one more adjustment, which takes me to my next point, that is customizing portable text. I mentioned that I wanted to be able to add code snippets. So I learned that portable text is Sanity's way to create rich text content, and it is this text editor that you can see right here. This is a picture of my studio. And with the blog template I used, I had a portable text setup that came with the normal heading styles, some decorators. I could also add images in between my paragraphs. And all of this was really good, but I wanted more options. And honestly, I thought that would be an obstacle for me, but thankfully, I quickly found out that portable text can be fully customized. This is a snippet of my portable text configuration, and I just wanted to show it because I remember that the first time I saw this, I thought that it was so cool that I could edit this in any way I wanted. I could remove some headings or some decorators or add new ones. For example, I added the code decorator to be able to add inline code, and that at the end you can add custom objects that you can create on your own or that you can install as plugins. And that is exactly what I did to add the code input. Thankfully, the code input can be installed as a plugin thanks to the Sanity team. So I just installed it using the Sanity CLI. And then I added the code object to the portable text configuration. And just like that, I was already able to add code snippets in between my paragraph blocks. So the next step I followed was displaying that to the front end. The way I did it is that I created a code snippet component that accepts the language and code props, and this is how I wrote my elements. And then since the way we tell the block content how this new object should be rendered is by passing serializers, I created my serializers constant, pass the new code type that I installed that receives the node information from Sanity and returns my component, and of course passes that information to the component. So anytime there is a code snippet in my portable text, my front end will render the code snippet component that I created. And as a final step, I pass the serializers to the block content that I imported from Sanity. So all that list of blocks could be turned into React. And this is the final result. I just wanted to briefly mention the steps I follow in case anyone is learning about portable text for the first time, as I was. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of what you can do to customize it. And this is my website, and this is a picture of my studio with the portable text. And in case anyone's interested, I used Prism for syntax highlighting. And I'm really happy with the results. So the last topic I want to cover today is how I handle things on the front end. So I can show you how my next app interacts with my data coming from Sanity. So one of my favorite Next.js features is that it has a file-based routing. And what that means is that anytime a file is added to the pages folder that comes with all Next apps, then it's automatically available as a route. And my blog route is actually called Journal. I named it Journal because I think it sounds cool. And in there, I have two files, the index.js and the slug.js files. The structure for my blog is very traditional. I have a main journal page with the list of all the articles, and that is the index.js page. So anytime you go to marucodes.com/journal, you will see this page. And each one of the article cards, it's linked using the slug that is defined in my Sanity project. And then when you click one, you can read the full article, and that is the slug page. And it is in square brackets because it is a dynamic route. All that means is that it is the changeable part of the route. And in my case, it can be any of my article slugs. Then to fetch my data and to make sure that my site is static, I use Next built-in data fetching functions. And for both pages, I use get static props. And what that means is that at build time, Next fetches my data. So these pages are pre-rendered with the data that was fetched, resulting in static pages. And since this log page is a dynamic route, I also had to use get static paths to define the number of paths that needed to be pre-rendered. So far, I only have 3 articles. So it generated 3 articles for my 3 routes for my 3 articles. So now I want to show you everything working together. So I'm going to move to my code editor. And this is my index.js file. And this is my post component with the one with the list of all the articles. And if we go down here, I have my get static props function. And all I'm doing is that I'm fetching my data using the Sanity client. And this is how my grub query looks. I'm getting all the posts and they are in descending order. So the latest one is always first. I'm getting the title, the body, and all that good information. Then using a custom object, I check if there is data. So if there is no data, show the not found page. That is another Next.js feature. And then if everything is good, return that post data as a prop that I then use on my component up here. And then I'm in full control to decide how to display everything. And I thought that was so cool. So all I'm doing is that I'm mapping through all that information so I can display each one of the article cards. And as I mentioned, they are linked using the slug that was defined in my Sanity project. And yeah, this is my index.js page, and that is how I fetch data with get static props. And then this slug page works in a very similar way, with the difference that I also had to use get static paths. So get static paths should always return an object with the paths property. And the way I did it is that I fetched all my slugs. That's why my grub query here is tiny. Then I mapped through all of them so that each one can return a params object. And the value for the params has to match the parameter I use in my page name. So since my page is called slug, that is why here it should also be called slug. And that's why it is called slug. And yeah, then for the poll function, I return the paths, and then I fetch each one of my articles with get static props. And the really cool thing about it is that you get access to the params that you define thanks to the context object that you automatically accept in the function. And then again, using the Sanity client, I fetch all my articles, but for that individual information. And I'm using template literals to pass that slug to my grub query. So basically how this works is that get static props will run for each one of my slugs. So far I have 3. So it will make 3 fetch requests, and each time it gets access to the path it needs thanks to the context object. And it will only fetch the data that matches that slug. So as a result, that will have all my routes and all my HTML pages with its corresponding data coming from Sanity. And if everything goes well, I return that single post as a prop that I then use up here in my component, my single post component. And yep, again, I'm in full control of deciding how to display everything. And this is how I did it. This is my title. I map through my categories array, my date, the author, and this is the blog content that we were talking about earlier. And yeah, that is my slug page, and all of these data is being pulled from my Sanity project, and this is how my studio looks. I'm really looking forward to styling it a little bit more because I know that I can change colors and add some icons, and really think that's really cool. So I really want to do that at some point. This is my portable text, and yeah, now going back to my slides. The last thing I want to mention is that if I could define my experience with Sanity and Next with one picture, it would be this one. I really felt like I had all the freedom and flexibility to decide how to customize my data, how to display my data, and how to fetch my data. And I thought that was really awesome. I mentioned that I used to think that I didn't have the technical skills to work with modern tools like Sanity, but actually using them allowed me to improve my coding skills. And I really think it was possible because Sanity just has all these awesome resources to get started and just feels familiar, as I mentioned in the beginning. And when you pair it with Next.js, you get so many awesome features to display that to your front end. And I really recommend anyone that is going through a similar experience like mine to try them and just build something fun. This was just an example of what you can do, but you can get really creative. And I really like that. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really hope the information was clear. And that is my website, marucodes.com, in case anyone wants to check it out. Does anyone have any questions?
Amazing talk. Also, everyone, Lauren is here, my co-host. I think there's a main burning question that we all have. Are you sure this was your first presentation? That was,
I know.
chef's kiss. That was amazing.
So great.
It was so good.
Yeah, but I practice a lot.
Well, great information. Thank you so much. We all learned a lot, and it's so great to see this from your perspective and what you went through and why you chose Sanity, but where you took it. So there are a couple of questions from the community or from the channel that we got in. The first one comes from Knut. So now that you started using Sanity, what would be your advice to yourself before you got started with Sanity? So now that you're in it, what would you tell the person that hasn't chosen to go with Sanity? What would be the advice that you'd give them?
So basically, what I did in the beginning, that it was having my goals clear in mind. That I actually did that in the beginning, and I think that's very important. So when you know what you want to accomplish and you have your goals clear, then it's easy to use any tool to adjust to that. So you're not adjusting to the tool, but you're making the tool to adjust to your project. And I think that's very important. And I'm very glad that I did that in the beginning. And I will also tell myself to learn how to read documentation because I used to be terrible at reading documentation. But working with Sanity kind of forced me that, okay, no, I have to read the docs. And that was, yeah, I also appreciate that I learned how to read docs as well with this project.
Did you have a good time with the docs?
I did. Yeah,
Okay,
I did. Especially with the Grok part. It was just so clear how to write my queries. When I saw that I had to use Grok, I was like, oh my God, this is another thing that I need to learn. But after reading the docs, it was just a few minutes, and I was already able to write my queries.
So we had another question in the chat. It's actually related to learning Grok. Did you use any other resources besides looking at the docs when you were learning Grok and making your queries?
I only use the dogs, and
Okay,
I believe that at one point I watched one of the videos that is available in the Sanity YouTube channel, but it was mainly the dogs. Yeah.
Right
excellent.
on. There are a bunch of Grok. If anyone's getting started with Grok, there are a bunch of resources that you can find in addition to the docs. Henrique, one of our applications engineers, did a like 45-minute course on it. But don't be afraid of Grok. Grok is your friend. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you got into it, and I'm glad it's working great for you and all that good stuff. Um, so yeah, thank you so much, and I mean, great presentation. I loved your slides. I love the design that you have on your. You paired up your slides with your website. I really like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
super
quickly
cute.
have a fun story about that because I remember that it was so easy to set up everything with my Sanity and my next app. And then I was like, oh yeah, I have the functionality. Now I just need to style it as if it was like this very small thing to do. And
Mm-hmm.
then I spent like 1 month after I had everything ready, just styling it. And I was like, it was so easy to set up everything with Sanity. And now I just spent a whole month just styling it.
Right on. And green is both Lo and I's favorite color. So when we see green,
Yes.
we get really excited.
I was super excited. I was like, yes, this looks so good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Maru. If anyone has any other questions, definitely stick them in the Meetup channel, or you can find Maru in that Slack community that we have. Also, let me put Maru's Twitter if you
Oh,
want to go follow her, and a link to marucodes.com so you can check out that beautiful green that we're talking about. Uh, but amazing stuff, and thank you
thank
so
you.
much for showing the code behind it and the studio behind it. It's always so fun to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you. Any final words before we part?
Mm, No, yeah, just thank you so much for the opportunity because it was, yes, it was my first time giving a talk and I really enjoyed the experience of preparing the content and even learning more about Sanity. So thank you.
Right on. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
You should come back
Thank
soon.
you. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.